Edgar Cayce revealed something most people never discover until it's too late. You're not lacking prosperity because the universe is withholding it from you. You're blocking it yourself right now, through patterns so deeply embedded in your consciousness that you mistake them for reality. In his trance readings, Cayce exposed how fear, resentment, and spiritual misalignment create invisible barriers that repel the very abundance desperately sought. The shocking truth: most people spend entire lifetimes pushing away prosperity while believing they're pursuing it, trapped in a self-created prison of limitation that has nothing to do with circumstances and everything to do with consciousness. What Cayce discovered during his psychic readings wasn't another law of attraction gimmick. It was the actual spiritual mechanics of how divine abundance flows through souls aligned with their purpose, and how that flow shuts down the moment we step out of alignment. Every financial struggle, every missed opportunity, every closed door might not be bad luck or divine punishment. It could be your own consciousness screaming that you're living out of sync with your soul's mission. Are you ready to discover what you've been blocking and why? Share in the comments what aspect of prosperity, financial, health, relationships, purpose you feel most blocked in right now. Edgar Cayce didn't enter his trance states to help people get rich. He entered them to help souls remember who they really are and why they're here. But something fascinating emerged across thousands of readings spanning decades. The same spiritual laws that govern consciousness also govern prosperity. Not prosperity as the world defines it, mere accumulation of money and things, but prosperity as the soul experiences it. The natural overflow of divine abundance that comes when a life aligns with its sacred purpose. In his readings, Cayce revealed that prosperity is not something you chase or manifest through affirmations and vision boards. Prosperity is something that flows through you when you stop being a dam and become a channel. The universe, or more accurately God, is constantly attempting to pour abundance through every soul on earth. But most people have constructed elaborate blockages in their consciousness that prevent this natural flow, and then they wonder why life feels like constant struggle and scarcity. Think about water for a moment. Water doesn't struggle to flow downstream. It doesn't affirm its way past boulders or visualize itself reaching the ocean. It simply flows wherever there's an opening, following the path of least resistance. Divine abundance works exactly the same way. It's always flowing, always available, always seeking channels through which to express. The question is never whether abundance exists. The question is whether you're blocking it or allowing it. Cayce identified the first and most devastating blockage: fear. Not just surface-level worry about bills or money, but deep existential fear that you're not worthy, that there's not enough, that you'll be abandoned or destroyed if you don't hoard and protect what little you have. In reading after reading, he saw how fear contracts the consciousness, how it literally shrinks your capacity to receive. Fear says, "I must grip what I have, because nothing more is coming." And in that gripping, that contraction, you close yourself off from the very flow you desperately need. Here's what most people never realize. Fear isn't just an emotion you experience. It's a frequency you broadcast, and the universe responds not to your words or wishes, but to your frequency. When you operate from fear, you're essentially telling the universe, "I am separate from divine supply. I am alone. I must fight for every scrap." And the universe, being a perfect mirror of consciousness, reflects that belief right back to you as circumstances that confirm your fear. Not because God is punishing you, but because you're creating from fear instead of faith. Cayce taught that prosperity begins the moment you shift from fear to trust. Not blind trust, not passive trust, but active trust in the spiritual law that says the universe provides for those who align with divine will. He saw in his readings that the most prosperous souls weren't necessarily the most talented or educated or connected. They were the most surrendered. They had released the illusion of control and stepped into flow. But fear isn't the only blockage. The second major obstruction Cayce identified was resentment, that toxic mixture of bitterness, anger, and blame that poisons the soul and repels abundance like a spiritual force field. In reading after reading, he encountered people struggling financially while harboring deep resentments toward parents, former partners, employers, or circumstances, and he told them plainly, You cannot hold resentment and receive abundance simultaneously. It's spiritually impossible. Why? Because resentment keeps you energetically tied to the past, to the wound, to the injustice, and prosperity can only flow to you in the present moment through present consciousness. When your energy is locked in the past, rehearsing old hurts and nurturing old anger, you're literally unavailable for the blessings trying to reach you right now. Resentment says, I was wronged, and I won't let it go until justice is served, until they pay, until the world acknowledges what happened to me. And while you're saying that, prosperity is flowing past you to souls who've learned to release and forgive. Cayce didn't sugarcoat forgiveness. He knew it's hard. He knew some wounds run deep. But he also knew from direct perception in the Akashic records that every soul carrying resentment is a soul blocking its own good. Not because God demands forgiveness as a moral requirement, but because forgiveness is the spiritual mechanism that reopens the channel. When you forgive, truly forgive, releasing the energetic attachment to the wound, you literally feel space opening up inside you. And into that space, abundance rushes in. Now here's where Cayce's teachings get really confronting. He taught that most financial struggle isn't random, and it isn't punishment. It's feedback. It's your soul trying to get your attention, trying to tell you that you're off course, that you're living someone else's life instead of your own, that you're pursuing goals that have nothing to do with why you incarnated. Prosperity doesn't flow to generic ambition. It flows to purpose. Think about it. How many people do you know who are technically successful but spiritually empty, who have money but no meaning, who've achieved everything society told them to achieve and still feel hollow inside? That's not prosperity, that's spiritual bankruptcy. Real prosperity, according to Cayce, is the natural result of living your soul's assignment. When you're doing what you came here to do, when you're serving in the way only you can serve, abundance finds you. You don't have to chase it because you've become a magnet for it, but here's the problem. Most people have no idea what their soul's assignment actually is. They're living inherited dreams, their parents' dreams, their culture's dreams, their ego's dreams, and then they wonder why prosperity feels so hard, why every dollar requires such struggle, why success never quite materializes despite all their effort. It's because they're rowing upstream against their own destiny. Cayce revealed in his readings that every soul comes into incarnation with specific gifts, specific talents, specific purposes. And when you align your daily life with those purposes, when your work expresses your gifts, when your relationships reflect your values, when your choices honor your soul, prosperity becomes effortless, not because life suddenly gets easy, but because you're finally rowing in the direction the current is already flowing. So how do you discover your purpose? Cayce gave specific guidance. Pay attention to what brings you joy, not superficial pleasure but deep joy. What activities make you lose track of time? What problems do you love solving? What kind of service lights you up from the inside? These aren't random preferences. They're spiritual breadcrumbs leading you back to your assignment. Your joy is your soul's way of saying, this way, keep going this way. But even when people discover their purpose, Cayce saw another blockage, attachment to outcome. People would find their calling and immediately start demanding it produce prosperity on their timeline, in their way, according to their specifications. And that demand, that attachment, that need to control how abundance shows up, that's another form of blockage. Cayce taught that true prosperity requires surrender. Not surrender as in giving up or being passive, but surrender as in releasing your grip on how things must unfold. You do your part. You align with purpose, you serve with excellence, you show up consistently, and then you trust the universe to handle the details. You don't demand that prosperity arrive as a specific job or a specific amount of money or a specific opportunity. You simply stay in flow and allow abundance to find you through whatever channels it chooses. This is where most people fail. They want to control not just their actions but also the results. They want to dictate to the universe exactly how their prosperity should manifest. And in that controlling, that micromanaging of divine flow, they constrict everything. True prosperity requires open hands, giving freely, receiving gratefully, trusting completely. Cayce also addressed what might be the most misunderstood blockage of all: karma. In reading after reading, he saw how unresolved karma from past lives creates present life limitations. Someone struggling with money might be balancing karma from a life where they hoarded wealth while others starved. Someone facing constant betrayal in business might be balancing karma from a life where they betrayed others for profit. This isn't punishment, it's balancing. It's the soul experiencing the other side of patterns it created, learning lessons it needs to learn. But here's the crucial point Cayce emphasized. Karma isn't destiny. You're not doomed to repeat patterns forever. The moment you recognize the lesson, the moment you make different choices, the moment you serve where you once took, the karmic pattern begins to shift. Prosperity that was blocked by old debt suddenly becomes available again because you've paid the debt through consciousness change, through service, through living differently than you lived before. Let me ask you something directly. What are you holding on to right now that's blocking your prosperity? Is it fear that whispers you're not enough? Is it resentment towards someone who hurt you years ago? Is it attachment to specific outcomes that prevents you from seeing the opportunities right in front of you? Is it living a life that looks good on paper but feels dead inside? Is it karma from patterns you haven't yet recognized or resolved? Because here's what Cayce made absolutely clear. The universe isn't withholding anything from you. God isn't testing you or making you prove yourself worthy. Abundance is always flowing, always available, always seeking expression through willing channels. If you're not experiencing prosperity in all its forms, financial, relational, physical, spiritual, it's because somewhere in your consciousness, you've built a dam. And that dam is costing you everything. The good news? You built it, which means you can dismantle it. Every blockage in your consciousness was constructed by you, consciously or unconsciously, and can be deconstructed through awareness, choice, and spiritual practice. Cayce gave specific methods: daily meditation to quiet fear and access inner guidance. Prayer not as begging, but as alignment with divine will. Service as the fastest way to shift from scarcity consciousness to abundance consciousness. Forgiveness work to release energetic ties to the past. And above all, ruthless honesty with yourself about whether you're actually living your purpose or just performing a role. Here's something Cayce said that most people find shocking. The universe doesn't care if you're comfortable. It cares if you're growing. And sometimes financial pressure or lack isn't a blockage you need to remove. It's a catalyst you need to respond to. It's life saying, this path isn't working. This job isn't aligned. This relationship is draining you. This version of yourself is too small for what's trying to be born through you. And until you hear that message and make different choices, the pressure continues. So prosperity isn't always about getting more. Sometimes it's about becoming more. More honest, more aligned, more surrendered, more purposeful, more you. And the instant you commit to that becoming, resources start appearing. Opportunities materialize. The right people show up. Doors open that you didn't even know existed. Not through magic, but through spiritual law. Consciousness creates, and when consciousness shifts, creation shifts with it. Cayce taught that there are 3 levels of prosperity consciousness. The first level is poverty consciousness, the belief that there's not enough, that you must fight for scraps, that life is fundamentally hostile and scarce. Most people live here, even people with money, because poverty consciousness isn't about bank balance. It's about internal terror of lack. The second level is what Cayce called prosperity consciousness, the recognition that the universe is abundant, that you're worthy of good things, that flow is possible. This is where affirmations and positive thinking operate. It's better than poverty consciousness, but still limited because it's still ego-based. You're still the one trying to manifest, trying to attract, trying to create. The third level, the level Cayce himself operated from, is divine supply consciousness. This is the recognition that you're not the source of your prosperity. You're a channel for it. God is the source. The universe is the source. Infinite creative intelligence is the source, and your job isn't to generate abundance, but to surrender enough, align enough, clear enough blockages that abundance can flow through you freely. At this level, you stop asking, how do I get prosperous, and start asking, how do I become a clearer channel for divine flow? This is the consciousness Cayce lived from and taught from. He gave thousands of readings, helped countless people, built organizations, And he did it all without ever charging set fees. He simply trusted that if he did his part, if he showed up, if he served, if he used his gift in alignment with divine will, he would be supported. And he was. Not always comfortably, not always predictably, but always sufficiently, always exactly enough for the next step. That's what prosperity actually is. Enough for the next step. Not a lifetime of guaranteed comfort. Not security that eliminates all risk. Not wealth that allows you to stop growing. But enough resources, enough support, enough grace to take the next step on the path your soul came here to walk. Are you taking that step? Or are you waiting for prosperity to arrive before you start living your purpose? Because Cayce was absolutely clear. It doesn't work that way. Purpose comes first. Alignment comes first. Service comes first. And then, as a natural consequence, prosperity follows. Not always immediately, not always in the form you expected, but it follows, as surely as summer follows spring, because it's spiritual law. If you found value in this exploration of Cayce's teachings on prosperity consciousness, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of souls committed to spiritual truth over spiritual entertainment, to depth over distraction, and drop a comment sharing the biggest blockage you're recognizing in yourself right now. Sometimes naming it out loud is the first step in dismantling it. The final blockage Cayce identified is perhaps the subtlest and most dangerous: spiritual materialism. This is when people use spiritual practices and teachings not to align with divine will, but to manipulate the universe into giving them what they want. It's using prayer as negotiation, meditation as manifestation technique, service as strategy for personal gain. And Cayce saw right through it every time. He would tell people, the universe cannot be fooled. God cannot be manipulated. You can't fake surrender. You can't pretend to align with divine will while secretly pursuing ego's agenda. Your consciousness is broadcasting your true intention, your real frequency every moment. And that frequency, not your words, not your affirmations, not your vision boards, determines what flows to you. True prosperity consciousness isn't about getting what you want. It's about wanting what serves the highest good, what serves soul growth, what serves divine purpose. When you genuinely want those things more than you want comfort or security or validation, abundance rushes in because you finally become safe to trust with it. You're no longer trying to use prosperity to avoid your growth. You're using it to serve your growth and the growth of others. Cayce told one person in a reading, "You're not here to be rich, you're here to be a blessing. And if being a blessing requires resources, the resources will come. But if you seek the resources first and the blessing second, you'll get neither." That statement contains the entire teaching. So let me ask you one more time with complete honesty. What is your relationship with prosperity right now? Is it one of fear and grasping, resentment and blame, control and manipulation? Or is it one of trust and flow? Have you aligned your life with your soul's purpose? Or are you still living someone else's dream? Are you serving from your gifts? Or are you just surviving? Are you blocking the flow with old wounds and fears? Or have you done the inner work to clear the channel? Because prosperity is waiting for you. Not someday, not in some future version of your life where you finally figured everything out. It's waiting right now, trying to reach you right now, pressing against every blockage you've constructed. And all it needs is for you to step aside, to release what isn't serving you, to forgive what needs forgiving, to align with what you came here to do. The flow is always there. The question is, are you ready to stop blocking it and start becoming it? Your soul knows the answer. Your life is showing you the answer. And now, maybe for the first time, you have the awareness to recognize what's been blocking you all along and the power to choose differently. Edgar Cayce opened the door. He showed the mechanics. He revealed the laws. He mapped the path from scarcity to sufficiency to sacred flow. Now it's your turn to walk through that door, to apply those laws to become the prosperity you've been seeking. Not someday. Today. Right now. In this moment of recognition, this moment of choice, this moment where you finally understand, you're not separate from divine abundance. You never were. You were just blocking your own awareness of it. And now that you know, now that you see, now that you understand, everything changes. If that truth landed for you, hit that like button, subscribe for more authentic spiritual teaching, and tell me in the comments, what are you ready to stop blocking? Let's talk about it. Right now, as you read this, there's a version of you that watches your suffering with absolute calm. Not because it's cold or indifferent, but because it remembers something your conscious mind has completely forgotten. Edgar Cayce spent over 4 decades entering altered states of consciousness, accessing what he called the Akashic records, and what he discovered about pain will disturb everything you think you know about why you suffer. In his readings, he revealed that before you were born, your soul looked at the life ahead. Every heartbreak, every loss, every moment of physical agony, and said yes, not as punishment, not as cosmic cruelty, but as the precise curriculum your eternal self needed to finally remember who you really are. The question that should terrify you isn't why pain exists, but why you've spent your entire life running from the one thing your soul knew would set you free. Drop a comment below. What pain are you resisting right now that might be trying to teach you something? There's a war happening inside you right now. Your ego, the part of you that identifies completely with your body, your personality, your current lifetime, is in absolute terror of pain. It will do anything to avoid suffering. It will lie, manipulate, numb itself, destroy relationships, abandon dreams, anything to escape discomfort. But there's another consciousness within you, what Cayce called your soul or higher self, and it's watching this desperate struggle with something that looks almost like patience. Because your soul knows something your ego has forgotten since the moment you took your first breath in this body. It knows that pain cannot destroy you. It knows that suffering is temporary. And most disturbingly, it knows that it chose this. Let me be absolutely clear about something before we go further. The pain you feel is real. When Cayce talked about the soul's relationship to suffering, he wasn't diminishing the genuine agony of human experience. He himself suffered tremendously in his final years, his body breaking down from the exhausting work of giving readings to thousands of desperate people. He understood physical pain. He understood grief. He understood the kind of soul-deep exhaustion that makes you question whether you can take another step. So when his readings revealed that the soul doesn't fear pain, he wasn't speaking from some detached, privileged position of someone who'd never truly suffered. He was speaking from the perspective of consciousness that had seen beyond the veil of physical existence and understood something that changes everything. In his trance states, Cayce consistently revealed that before each incarnation, the soul reviews what it needs to learn, what karma it needs to balance, what spiritual qualities it needs to develop. And then, and this is the part that most people find almost impossible to accept, the soul chooses the circumstances of the upcoming life, specifically because they provide the exact conditions necessary for that growth. Not every detail, not every minor event, but the major themes, the significant challenges, the core struggles. Your soul looked at the pain ahead and recognized it not as something to fear, but as the forge in which your consciousness would be refined. Think about what this means. The chronic illness you've battled for years, the betrayal that shattered your trust in love, the financial devastation that stripped away your security, the loss of someone whose absence still echoes through every day. Cayce's readings suggest that at the soul level, you understood these experiences were coming, not as punishment for some cosmic sin, but as the specific curriculum your eternal self needed to evolve. Your soul doesn't fear these experiences because it recognizes them as temporary, purposeful, and ultimately transformative. But your ego, your ego is absolutely convinced that any pain, any discomfort, any challenge threatens its very existence. And here's where it gets really uncomfortable. Cayce revealed that much of human suffering comes not from the painful events themselves, but from our resistance to them. He spoke repeatedly in his readings about the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is the physical or emotional sensation itself. Suffering is what happens when the ego fights against pain, when it tells stories about how wrong this is, how unfair, how it shouldn't be happening. The soul accepts, the ego resists. And that resistance amplifies the original pain 1,000-fold, turning a challenging experience into genuine torment. In one of his readings, Cayce explained that the soul understands what he called the law of cause and effect, what Eastern traditions call karma. But here's what most people get completely wrong about karma. It's not punishment, it's not some cosmic accountant keeping track of your sins and making you pay. Cayce was emphatic about this. Karma is the soul's educational system. If you caused pain in a previous life through cruelty or ignorance, you might choose to experience that same type of pain in this life, not to be punished, but to finally understand, to develop genuine compassion, to balance your consciousness. Your soul knows this. It agreed to this. It recognized that experiencing what you once inflicted on others would transform your understanding in a way that no amount of theoretical knowledge ever could. But why? Why would any conscious entity agree to suffer? This is where Cayce's concept of Christ consciousness becomes absolutely central to understanding the soul's perspective on pain. In his readings, Christ consciousness wasn't about religious dogma or believing the right things. It was about achieving the same level of consciousness that Jesus demonstrated, the awareness that you are one with God, that you are an eternal spiritual being having a temporary physical experience, that nothing in the material world can touch the truth of what you really are. And how do you develop that consciousness? How do you stop identifying with the ego and remember your divine nature? Almost always, Cayce said, through the crucible of suffering that forces you to let go of everything you thought you were. Jesus himself demonstrated this. He didn't avoid pain, he didn't use his spiritual powers to escape suffering. He walked directly into the experience that would cause the maximum agony: betrayal by a trusted friend, abandonment by his closest companions, torture, crucifixion, because he understood what his soul knew. That pain could not touch his real self, that the body could be destroyed but consciousness would continue, that suffering accepted with the right understanding becomes the doorway to resurrection, to transformation, to the remembrance of your eternal nature. Cayce's readings suggested that every soul at some level is trying to achieve that same realization, and pain is often the teacher that finally breaks through the ego's illusions. Now I can already hear some of you pushing back on this, and you should. Because there's a toxic version of these teachings that needs to be called out. Some people twist these concepts to suggest that if you're suffering, it's somehow your fault, that you chose it, so stop complaining, that people in pain are just not spiritually evolved enough to transcend it. That's not what Cayce taught, not even close. He emphasized compassion above everything else. He spent his entire life helping people alleviate their suffering through holistic healing approaches. He never told someone in pain to just accept it without seeking relief. The soul's acceptance of pain as a learning tool doesn't mean you should be passive about suffering, or that seeking help is somehow spiritually weak. What Cayce was pointing to is a shift in perspective that happens gradually as you begin to access your soul's consciousness. It's not about pretending pain doesn't hurt. It's about starting to recognize, in the midst of your most difficult experiences, that there's a part of you that remains unshaken, not numb, not in denial, but deeply connected to something larger than this moment, this body, this lifetime. It's the part of you that can watch your ego's panic and say, with genuine calm, this too shall pass. This too has purpose. This too is leading somewhere. Cayce gave thousands of readings for people in extraordinary pain, physical diseases, mental anguish, devastating losses, and consistently he would trace their current suffering back to soul-level causes, past life experiences that needed balancing, spiritual lessons that required this specific challenge, karmic patterns that could only be broken through this exact situation. But here's what's crucial. He never left people without practical guidance for working through their pain. He offered medical advice, spiritual practices, mental disciplines, emotional support. The soul's perspective doesn't eliminate the need for the ego to be cared for during difficult experiences. It provides a larger context that can make the pain bearable, meaningful, even transformative. Let me ask you something. If you knew with absolute certainty that your current struggle was specifically designed by your own higher consciousness to teach you something essential, would you relate to it differently? If you understood that your soul deliberately chose this challenge because it's the precise experience needed to burn away some pattern that's been blocking your spiritual evolution for multiple lifetimes, Would that change how you move through it? Cayce's readings suggest that at the deepest level, you do. Know this? Your soul is completely aware of the purpose behind your pain, but your ego has amnesia. It forgot the plan, it forgot that it volunteered, and so it experiences every challenge as random cruelty instead of intentional curriculum. This amnesia, Cayce explained, is actually part of the design. If you remembered everything, all your past lives, all your soul's intentions for this life, the exact lessons you came to learn, you'd be playing with a stacked deck. The whole point is to navigate challenges without conscious memory of why they're happening, because that's what forces genuine growth. It's easy to be patient when you know exactly when your suffering will end. It's easy to be compassionate when you consciously remember being cruel in a past life and understand you're balancing that karma. The real transformation happens when you choose patience, compassion, and faith without any certainty about why you're suffering or when it will end. That's when the soul-level learning actually occurs. In his readings on what happens after death, Cayce revealed that souls who've just transitioned review their completed life with what he called perfect understanding. They see exactly why every painful experience occurred. They understand the spiritual purpose behind their struggles. They recognize the growth that happened through their challenges. And overwhelmingly, Cayce said, souls don't judge their difficult lives as mistakes or tragedies. They see them as successful learning experiences, even when they involve tremendous suffering. They see that the pain they feared so deeply while alive was actually the exact catalyst they needed for evolution. But while you're here embodied, that understanding is veiled. You have to develop faith that there's meaning in your struggles without proof, without certainty, without the comfort of seeing the bigger picture. So what does this mean practically? How do you begin to access your soul's perspective on pain while you're still very much identified with your ego and your body? Cayce offered specific guidance. First, meditation. He emphasized daily meditation as the primary tool for connecting with your higher self, for accessing the consciousness that remembers why you're here and what you're learning. In those quiet moments, when the ego's constant chatter finally settles, you might catch glimpses of a deeper knowing, a sense that even your most difficult experiences are somehow purposeful and temporary. Second, he talked about the importance of asking better questions. The ego asks, why is this happening to me? With an undertone of victimhood and injustice. The soul asks, what is this here to teach me? With genuine curiosity and openness. That shift in questioning begins to bridge the gap between ego consciousness and soul consciousness. You stop being the victim of random suffering and start being the eternal student engaged in deliberate learning. Third, Cayce emphasized the practice of accepting responsibility without self-blame. This is subtle but crucial. Accepting that at some level you chose your challenges is not the same as beating yourself up for being in pain. It's recognizing that your struggles make sense within a larger spiritual context you can't fully see yet. It's saying, I may not understand why, but I trust that my soul knows what it's doing, and I'm going to work with this experience instead of just fighting against it. Let me be honest with you about something. I'm not suggesting any of this is easy. Accessing your soul's perspective on pain while you're in the midst of genuine suffering is one of the hardest spiritual practices there is. Cayce himself struggled with this. Near the end of his life, when his body was failing and he'd given so many readings that he'd exhausted himself completely, did he maintain perfect soul-level equanimity? No. He was human. He suffered. He struggled. But there were also moments, his family reported, when something shifted in him. When you could see him accessing a deeper knowing that brought genuine peace even in the midst of his physical decline. That's what we're actually talking about here. Not some superhuman transcendence of all pain, not spiritual bypassing where you pretend suffering doesn't matter, but brief moments of connection with the part of you that knows this body is temporary, this lifetime is one of many, this pain is purposeful even when it's agonizing. Those moments don't eliminate the suffering, but they provide enough perspective to keep moving forward. They remind you that you're not just the small self that's hurting right now. You're also the eternal self that chose this experience, knowing you would grow from it. Here's what Cayce's readings suggest should genuinely disturb you. It's not that you're suffering. Suffering is universal, inevitable, and at the soul level, purposeful. What should disturb you is the possibility that you're suffering without learning from it, that you're going through painful experiences while remaining completely unconscious of their spiritual purpose, that you'll finish this lifetime and transition back to soul consciousness, only to realize you missed the entire lesson, that you resisted so hard against your challenges that you failed to extract their transformative potential. And if Cayce was right about reincarnation and karma, that means you'll need to come back and do this again. The same lesson, the same type of pain, until you finally stop running from it and start learning from it. Think about the pain you're currently experiencing or the suffering you've been through recently. What if it's not random? What if it's not punishment? What if it's precisely calibrated by your own soul to teach you something you couldn't learn any other way? What if your soul looked at all possible experiences and said, this one, this exact challenge with this specific type of pain, this is what will finally break through my ego's defenses and help me remember my divine nature? Would you relate to your struggle differently if you understood it as chosen rather than inflicted? Cayce taught that the universe is fundamentally benevolent, that God is love, that consciousness is eternal and constantly evolving toward greater awareness. But that evolution almost always requires the friction of difficult experiences. It's not that God wants you to suffer. It's that suffering is the natural consequence of consciousness operating in a physical dimension where things change, decay, die, and cause pain. And rather than this being a design flaw, Cayce's readings suggest it's actually the perfect system for souls to develop qualities they could never develop in realms where everything is easy and pain-free. Compassion, patience, faith, courage, resilience, surrender. These aren't abstract concepts. They're spiritual muscles that can only be built through the resistance of real challenges. If you're right now in physical pain, your soul doesn't fear it because it knows your body is temporary. If you're in emotional anguish, your soul doesn't fear it because it knows emotions pass and transform. If you're in existential crisis questioning the meaning of everything, your soul doesn't fear it because it knows these crises often immediately precede breakthrough and expansion. What your ego experiences as the end of everything, your soul recognizes as the death of what you were preparing you for the birth of what you're becoming. But here's the tension. You can't just flip a switch and suddenly access your soul's perspective. Cayce never promised that. The work of bridging ego consciousness and soul consciousness is gradual, requiring persistent spiritual practice and often facilitated by, yes, the very pain you're trying to escape. It's the ultimate paradox. The suffering you resist is often the doorway to the consciousness that would allow you to transcend that resistance. Your ego wants relief before it will stop fighting. Your soul knows that stopping the fight is what brings relief. Before we wrap up, I want you to take a moment and hit that like button if this video is shifting something in how you understand your own struggles. Subscribe to this channel because we're going deep into Cayce's most challenging and transformative teachings. And drop a comment sharing, if you're comfortable, what pain you've been resisting that this video is making you reconsider. Because here's what I know from studying Cayce for years. These aren't just intellectual concepts. This is lived wisdom. And the community that gathers around these teachings often provides the support people need to actually walk through their challenges with more consciousness and less resistance. So where does this leave us? You're still going to feel pain. If you break your leg, it's going to hurt. If someone betrays you, you're going to grieve. If you watch someone you love suffer, you're going to ache for them. Cayce's teachings don't promise to eliminate any of that. What they offer is a radically different framework for understanding what pain means and why it exists. They suggest that your soul, the real you, the eternal you, isn't sitting somewhere shaking in terror every time your body hurts or your ego gets wounded. It's watching with what can only be described as loving awareness, knowing that every difficult experience is gradually, inexorably, leading you toward the remembrance of your divine nature. The next time you're in pain, try this. Just for a moment, see if you can notice the part of you that's watching the pain, not experiencing it directly but aware of it. There's the sensation itself, and then there's the awareness of the sensation. The sensation changes, it intensifies, it fades, it shifts location. but the awareness remains constant. That awareness, Cayce would say, is closer to your soul's perspective. It's the part of you that can't actually be hurt by anything happening in the physical or emotional realms, because it's not identical with those realms. It's the eternal witness, the consciousness that will continue after this body dies, that existed before this body was born. Your ego will panic at this suggestion. It will insist that you are the one in pain, not just watching pain happen to a temporary body. And that's okay. That's exactly the identification with the ego that makes physical experience feel so real and intense. But if you can catch even brief glimpses of the awareness beneath the pain, you're beginning to access what your soul knows, that you're much more than this moment of suffering, much more than this body, much more than this lifetime's struggles. Edgar Cayce's most profound gift wasn't predicting the future or diagnosing illnesses, though he did both remarkably. His most profound gift was repeatedly pointing people toward the truth of what they really are. Eternal souls temporarily wearing physical bodies, here to learn, to grow, to remember their connection to the divine. And pain, as brutal as it can be, is often the experience that finally cracks open the ego's certainty that it knows who you are, creating space for your soul's knowing to emerge. Your soul doesn't fear pain because it remembers what your ego has forgotten, that you're indestructible at the deepest level, that suffering is temporary even when it feels endless, that every challenge is purposeful even when the purpose isn't visible, and that you chose to be here in this body, facing these specific struggles because this is exactly what your consciousness needed to finally wake up. The question isn't whether you'll experience pain. You will. The question is whether you'll let that pain remain meaningless suffering, or whether you'll begin to work with it as the spiritual curriculum your soul designed for this lifetime. And that choice, to resist or to accept, to remain unconscious or to wake up, to see yourself as victim or as eternal student, that's the real difference between living from your ego's fear or your soul's knowing. So I'll leave you with the most uncomfortable question of all. What if the pain you've been running from your entire life is actually the doorway to the freedom you've been seeking? What if your soul is waiting, with infinite patience, for you to finally stop fighting against your challenges long enough to discover what they came to teach you? And what if the moment you stop running is the moment everything finally begins to change? What if every devastating failure in your life, every crushing disappointment, every moment of unbearable pain was actually your soul's deliberate design for spiritual advancement? Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, revealed in his trance states something that contradicts everything we've been taught about suffering. That our greatest agonies are often our greatest gifts, carefully orchestrated by our own higher consciousness before we even took this breath. In thousands of readings given while in deep psychic sleep, Cayce explained that souls specifically choose difficult circumstances, painful relationships, and heartbreaking failures as accelerated learning experiences that would take multiple easier lifetimes to accomplish. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending pain doesn't hurt. It's about understanding that your soul signed up for these exact challenges because it knew they contained the precise lessons needed for your spiritual evolution. The question that should terrify and excite you in equal measure is this: are you learning what your soul intended, or are you wasting the very suffering you chose? Share in the comments what failure or pain in your life might actually be a blessing you haven't yet recognized. There's a reading Edgar Cayce gave that should fundamentally change how you view every difficult moment in your life. A woman came to him, devastated by a series of catastrophic failures, lost her business, her marriage had crumbled, her health was deteriorating. She wanted to know why God was punishing her. What Cayce revealed while in his trance state wasn't punishment at all. He explained that before she was born, her soul had reviewed her karmic patterns from previous lives and specifically chose these challenges because they were the exact medicine needed to heal ancient spiritual wounds and develop qualities her soul desperately needed. This wasn't some cosmic accident or divine cruelty. It was intelligent design by her own higher self. Cayce's readings consistently revealed that souls are not victims of circumstance, but architects of experience. In his deep psychic states, he could access what he called the Akashic records, the cosmic library containing every soul's complete history across all lifetimes. What he found there revolutionizes our understanding of suffering. Souls approaching incarnation review their progress, identify specific weaknesses and undeveloped spiritual muscles, then deliberately choose life circumstances that will force growth in exactly those areas. The soul that needs to develop compassion might choose a life of suffering. The soul that needs to learn humility might choose worldly success, followed by spectacular public failure. The soul that needs to understand forgiveness might choose a family situation requiring it. Your pain isn't random, it's curriculum. But here's where this gets uncomfortable. Cayce revealed that souls don't just choose general themes of difficulty, they select specific people, situations, and even timing of hardships with surgical precision. That person who betrayed you, your soul knew them before birth and agreed to that exact dynamic because something in your spiritual development required that specific flavor of betrayal to crack open a hardened place in your heart. That career failure that humiliated you. Your soul scheduled it for that precise moment because you were developing spiritual pride that needed to be dismantled before it calcified into something more damaging. That health crisis that forced you to slow down. Your soul recognized you were heading towards spiritual amnesia, too distracted by material pursuits to remember why you came here. The readings reveal that souls don't choose suffering for punishment. They choose it as the most efficient path to remembering divinity. Think about that. Before you took your first breath, your soul looked at the entirety of your spiritual journey, identified the exact weaknesses preventing your evolution toward Christ consciousness, and said, I need these specific challenges to grow. I need this particular pain to open my heart. I need this precise failure to destroy my false self so my true self can emerge. Your higher consciousness chose difficulty, not because you deserved punishment, but because you deserved the fastest possible path home to God. Suffering is the accelerated course. Comfort is the slow track. Your soul chose acceleration. Cayce explained that souls typically have three options when planning an incarnation. The first option is what he called the easy path, a relatively comfortable life with minimal challenges, where spiritual growth happens slowly over many lifetimes through gentle experiences. The second option is the balanced path, a mix of pleasure and pain, success and failure, where growth happens at a moderate pace. The third option is what Cayce called the accelerated path, a life packed with intense challenges, painful initiations, and difficult relationships that compress multiple lifetimes of growth into one incarnation. Most souls, he revealed, don't choose the easy path. They choose acceleration because at the soul level, we understand that temporary earthly suffering is nothing compared to the agony of spiritual stagnation. Your soul is ambitious. It didn't come here to coast. It came here to conquer. But this raises the question that should be keeping you awake at night. If your soul deliberately chose your pain for specific spiritual development, are you actually learning what you're supposed to learn, or are you just suffering stupidly? Cayce was clear about this distinction. He explained that suffering can either be transformative or repetitive. Transformative suffering changes you. It breaks open your heart, destroys your ego attachments, forces you to depend on God rather than material security, teaches you compassion, develops your spiritual strength. Repetitive suffering just loops endlessly because you're refusing to learn the lesson. So your soul keeps serving up variations of the same painful experience until you finally get it. Every time you blame others for your pain, instead of looking for the spiritual lesson, you guarantee you'll experience that pain again. Every time you play victim instead of asking, what is my soul trying to teach me through this, you reset the curriculum and have to take the course again. Every time you numb the pain instead of letting it transform you, you waste the very suffering your soul chose. The readings reveal something even more challenging. Cayce explained that many souls specifically choose painful relationships with people they've hurt in previous lifetimes. That difficult parent who wounded you. There's a strong possibility that in a previous life, you were the wounding parent and they were the wounded child. That partner who betrayed you? Perhaps you were the betrayer in another incarnation. That person who can't forgive you no matter what you do. Maybe you were the one who couldn't forgive them centuries ago. Cayce's readings showed that souls often reverse roles across lifetimes, specifically to develop empathy and understanding from both sides of painful dynamics. This isn't about blame or guilt. It's about recognizing that on the soul level, we're all both student and teacher, both wounded and wounder, cycling through experiences until we learn that the only way to break these painful patterns is through forgiveness and love. Here's what makes this teaching so powerful. When you understand that your pain is your soul's curriculum, everything changes. That failure isn't evidence you're broken. It's evidence you're enrolled in advanced spiritual education. That betrayal isn't proof the universe is cruel. It's proof your soul trusts you enough to handle difficult material. That loss isn't punishment. It's preparation for a level of spiritual depth you couldn't access through easier means. Cayce revealed that the souls who choose the most difficult lives are actually the most spiritually advanced souls, because only developed souls can handle intense curriculum without completely fragmenting. Your suffering might actually be evidence of your spiritual sophistication, not your cosmic punishment. But receiving this understanding requires brutal honesty. You have to look at your life and ask, what patterns keep repeating? What types of pain show up again and again? What lessons am I obviously avoiding? Cayce explained that repetitive suffering is your soul's way of turning up the volume on a lesson you keep ignoring. If you keep attracting the same type of toxic relationship, your soul is trying to teach you something about boundaries, self-worth, or recognizing red flags. If you keep experiencing financial crises despite working hard, your soul might be teaching you about security that comes from God rather than bank accounts. If you keep getting sick whenever you're about to achieve something big, your soul might be addressing deep unworthiness or fear of visibility. The pattern is the pointer. The repetition is the curriculum. Your soul will keep serving up variations of the same painful experience until you finally stop, pay attention, and ask, what am I supposed to learn from this? Cayce's readings revealed that one of the most common spiritual failures is what he called wasted suffering. Going through intense pain but refusing to let it change you, refusing to extract the spiritual gold hidden in the difficulty. He explained that souls can spend entire lifetimes in suffering without any spiritual growth if they remain in victim consciousness, blame consciousness, or numbing consciousness. The pain alone doesn't transform you. Your willingness to be transformed by the pain is what matters. Your willingness to ask, how is this serving my spiritual evolution, is what turns suffering from curse into catalyst. This is why some people emerge from tragedy with deeper compassion, stronger faith, and more genuine humanity, while others emerge bitter, closed, and spiritually dead. Same suffering, different response. Same curriculum, different grades. The pain is neutral. It's what you do with it that determines whether your soul's investment in that suffering pays spiritual dividends or goes bankrupt. Now let's talk about what Cayce called divine failures, those moments when everything you've worked for collapses, despite your best efforts. In his readings, Cayce explained that souls sometimes engineer spectacular failures at precise moments because success in that direction would have taken you further from your soul's actual mission. That business that failed right when success seemed guaranteed. Perhaps your soul knew that success in that particular venture would have inflated your ego, distracted you from your real calling, or attached you to material identity in ways that would have stunted your spiritual growth. That relationship that fell apart right when you thought you'd found the one. Perhaps your soul recognized that person wasn't aligned with your actual spiritual path, and staying together would have kept both of you from your real soul partners and missions. Divine failures aren't the universe being cruel. They're your soul being ruthlessly committed to your spiritual success, even when that requires earthly failure. Cayce revealed something profound about timing. Souls don't just choose what challenges we'll face, but precisely when we'll face them. That devastating loss that happened right before you were about to make a major life decision? Your soul's timing. That health crisis that forced you to slow down right when your life was spiraling into meaningless busyness. Your soul's intervention. That failure that happened right when you were becoming spiritually arrogant. Your soul's medicine. The timing of your pain is never accidental. Your soul waits for the exact moment when that particular difficulty will have maximum transformative impact and minimum long-term damage. This requires you to trust that even when life feels like chaos, there's a deeper intelligence orchestrating your experiences toward your highest good. But here's the part of Cayce's teaching that most people resist. He explained that comfort is often more dangerous to spiritual growth than suffering. A comfortable life lets you fall asleep spiritually. It lets you forget why you're here. It lets you invest in temporary things as if they're permanent. It lets you build an identity based on material success, social status, or physical appearance, all things that will eventually be stripped away. Suffering is the alarm clock that wakes you up from the dream of materialism. Failure is the demolition that clears space for authentic spiritual building. Pain is the fire that burns away everything false, so only truth remains. Your soul knew you'd fall asleep in comfort, so it scheduled wake-up calls. Cayce's readings showed that many people specifically pray for spiritual growth, deeper faith, and closer connection to God, then get upset when their prayers are answered with difficulty. They wanted the destination without the journey. They wanted transformation without the transformative process. They wanted the pearl without the grit that creates it. But spiritual growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. Faith isn't developed when everything's easy. Connection to God isn't deepened when you can handle everything yourself. Your soul knows this, so it creates circumstances that require you to develop exactly what you asked for. When you prayed for patience, your soul sent you situations requiring patience. When you prayed for faith, your soul sent you circumstances that demanded faith. When you prayed for compassion, your soul sent you people who triggered your judgment so you could transform it. You're not being punished for praying. You're receiving exactly what you asked for, just not in the package you expected. Let's address the question you're probably asking. Does this mean we should just accept suffering and never try to change our circumstances? Absolutely not. Cayce was clear that while souls choose challenges, we also have free will in how we respond. The lesson isn't to become passive or to romanticize suffering. The lesson is to extract wisdom from difficulty while also taking responsible action to improve circumstances. You can simultaneously recognize, my soul chose this challenge for my growth, and I'm going to work intelligently to overcome this challenge. These aren't contradictory, they're complementary. The spiritual approach to suffering isn't passive acceptance, it's active transformation while maintaining awareness of the deeper purpose. Cayce revealed that the souls who evolve fastest are those who can hold two truths simultaneously. This is painful, and I want it to change, and this is serving my spiritual evolution in ways I may not fully understand. This balanced perspective prevents both victim consciousness, life is happening to me unfairly, and spiritual bypassing, everything is perfect, exactly as it is, so I'll do nothing. Instead, it creates what Cayce called conscious cooperation with divine will, recognizing the spiritual curriculum while actively engaging with it rather than passively enduring it. You're not meant to just suffer. You're meant to be transformed by suffering and then transcend the need for that particular flavor of suffering. Here's something that should shift your entire perspective on pain. Cayce explained that in the afterlife, souls don't regret their earthly suffering. They regret wasted suffering. When you review your life from the soul's perspective after death, you won't be upset about the hard times. You'll be upset about the hard times you went through without learning anything, the pain you experienced without letting it open your heart, the failures you endured without extracting wisdom. The tragedy isn't suffering itself. It's suffering without transformation. It's going through hell and coming out the other side exactly the same person you were before. Your soul will judge you not by how much you suffered, but by how much you grew through suffering. This brings us to what might be the most important question of your entire life. What is your current pain trying to teach you? Not superficially, but at the soul level. If you could step back and look at your life from your soul's perspective, what would you see? What patterns would be obvious? What lessons would be clear? What spiritual muscles are being developed through your current challenges? What false attachments are being burned away? What illusions about yourself are being shattered? What doors to deeper spiritual understanding are being forced open? Before you hit subscribe to this channel, and like this video to support this spiritual content. And you should, because you're part of a community seeking authentic spiritual truth. Take a moment right now to actually ask yourself these questions. Don't rush past them. Your soul chose your specific combination of pain and challenges for specific reasons. The universe doesn't waste suffering. Your soul doesn't schedule random difficulties. Everything painful in your life is pointing towards something. Some growth, some lesson, some transformation that your higher self knows you need. What if you stopped resisting your pain long enough to listen to what it's trying to tell you? Cayce's readings revealed that the universe communicates through 3 languages: through joy, when we're aligned with our soul's path; through discomfort, when we're starting to drift off course; and through pain, when we've significantly deviated from our spiritual mission. Pain is the universe's loudest message. It's not punishment, it's communication. It's your soul screaming, "Wake up. You're going the wrong direction. You're investing in things that won't matter. You're building an identity that isn't real. You're forgetting why you came here." The intensity of the pain corresponds to how far off course you've drifted and how urgently you need to correct. Your greatest suffering is often directly proportional to how important the lesson is for your soul's evolution. Let's talk about what Cayce called karmic failures, situations where you experience difficulty because of patterns carried over from previous lifetimes. In his readings, he could identify when someone's current suffering was rooted in actions from past lives. But here's what's crucial. He explained that karmic difficulty isn't punishment, it's opportunity. If your soul carries a pattern of betrayal from a previous life, you might experience betrayal in this life, not as punishment, but as a chance to respond differently than you did before. If you betrayed others in a past life, experiencing betrayal now gives you direct empathy for what you put others through. If you were betrayed in a past life, experiencing similar betrayal now gives you an opportunity to respond with forgiveness rather than vengeance, breaking the karmic cycle. Every painful pattern is a cosmic do-over, a chance to get it right this time. Cayce revealed that souls actually get excited about challenging incarnations because they represent accelerated growth opportunities. Imagine your soul reviewing potential lifetimes before birth. One option is an easy, comfortable life where you'll grow slowly over many incarnations. Another option is a difficult life packed with challenges that could accomplish in one lifetime what might otherwise take 5 or 10. Advanced souls, Cayce explained, almost always choose the difficult option because at the soul level, we understand that earthly time is brief and spiritual evolution is what matters. Your soul looked at your current life, with all its pain, failures, and difficulties, and said, "Yes, this one. This is the life I want. These are exactly the challenges I need." The fact that you're suffering doesn't mean something went wrong. It means something is going exactly as your soul planned. But this creates a profound responsibility. If your soul specifically chose your challenges, then wasting those challenges is a spiritual tragedy. Going through intense pain without transformation is like paying for an expensive education and skipping all the classes. You paid the tuition, your suffering is real, but you're not getting the degree. You're experiencing the difficulty without receiving the growth. And here's what's devastating. Cayce explained that if you don't learn the lesson in this lifetime, you'll have to take the course again in a future lifetime. Same lesson, different costume, but the core challenge will repeat until you finally extract the wisdom your soul needs. You can either learn it now or learn it later, but your soul will keep serving up the lesson until you pass the test. This is why Cayce emphasized the importance of what he called spiritual accounting, regularly reviewing your life to identify the lessons embedded in your experiences. He suggested that people should periodically ask themselves, what patterns keep repeating in my life? What types of people or situations trigger me most intensely? Where do I feel most resistant or defensive? What am I constantly complaining about? These aren't random annoyances. They're signposts pointing toward your soul's curriculum. The things that trigger you most reveal where you most need to grow. The situations you complain about most reveal lessons you're avoiding. The people who irritate you most are often your most important spiritual teachers. Your irritations are invitations to evolution. Let's address something important. Understanding that your soul chose your challenges doesn't mean other people aren't responsible for their harmful actions. This isn't about excusing abuse or accepting mistreatment. Cayce was clear that while souls choose challenging dynamics, free will means people can still make choices that go beyond what was agreed upon at the soul level. Someone can be part of your soul's curriculum without that justifying their cruelty. You can recognize my soul chose to experience betrayal to develop certain qualities, while also recognizing that person's choice to betray me was still their responsibility and wrong. Spiritual understanding of soul contracts doesn't eliminate personal accountability. It adds a layer of meaning to painful experiences without excusing harmful behavior. Here's where this gets really practical. If you can accept that your soul chose your current difficulties for specific growth, how does that change your response to them? Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "Why did I choose this to happen for me?" Instead of playing victim, you become the spiritual detective investigating what lesson is hidden in this difficulty. Instead of just trying to escape the pain as quickly as possible, you first extract the wisdom, develop the quality your soul intended, learn the lesson, and then you transcend the need for that particular suffering. The fastest way out of painful patterns is through them, not around them. Cayce explained that there are specific signs that indicate you're learning your soul's lessons versus just enduring suffering. If you're learning, you'll notice these changes. You develop greater compassion for others going through similar struggles. You find yourself less judgmental and more understanding. You start seeing patterns you were blind to before. You feel a deepening connection to God even as material circumstances deteriorate. You discover strength you didn't know you had. You lose attachment to things that used to define you. You become more authentic and less concerned with others' opinions. You feel guided even in chaos. You develop gratitude for the growth even while disliking the method. These are the signatures of transformative suffering, pain that's accomplishing what your soul intended. But if you're going through difficulty without these changes, if you're just becoming more bitter, more closed, more fearful, more judgmental, more attached to material security, more disconnected from God, then you're experiencing what Cayce called wasted suffering. The pain is real, but the transformation isn't happening, and that means you'll likely have to repeat this lesson in some form until you finally allow it to change you. Think about the most painful experience of your life, the one that nearly destroyed you, the one you're still recovering from. Now ask yourself honestly, did that pain transform you or did you just survive it? Did it open your heart or did it close you off? Did it deepen your faith or did it breed cynicism? Did it make you more compassionate or more judgmental? Did it reveal your strength or convince you of your weakness? Did it connect you more deeply to God or make you feel abandoned? Your answer reveals whether you're learning what your soul intended or wasting the very suffering you chose. Here's the beautiful, terrible truth. Your soul loves you enough to let you suffer. It loves you too much to let you stay comfortable in illusions. It loves you enough to orchestrate painful wake-up calls when you're drifting towards spiritual sleep. It loves you enough to strip away false securities so you'll finally depend on God. It loves you enough to let relationships end that were keeping you from your real mission. It loves you enough to let you fail in pursuits that weren't aligned with your soul's purpose. This isn't cruelty, it's the deepest form of love. The love that wants your spiritual evolution more than your temporary comfort. The love that's willing to let you hate this incarnation if it means you'll finally wake up and remember why you came. Your soul's love looks like pain because it's more committed to your transformation than your comfort. As we come to the end of this message, I want you to sit with something uncomfortable. What if everything you thought was wrong in your life is actually exactly right from your soul's perspective? What if your greatest failures are your most important successes? What if the people who hurt you most were your greatest teachers? What if the doors that closed were actually protecting you from paths that would have led you away from your real mission? What if your suffering isn't evidence that God abandoned you, but evidence that your soul trusts you enough to handle advanced curriculum? Please subscribe to this channel and hit the like button if this perspective is shifting something in you, because you're part of a community that's choosing to see life from the soul's perspective rather than the ego's. And we need to support each other in this radical way of understanding difficulty. And share in the comments, What pain or failure in your life, when viewed from this higher perspective, might actually be a blessing you haven't fully recognized yet? The question isn't whether your pain is serving a purpose. Cayce's readings make clear that it is. The question is whether you're awake enough to recognize the purpose, humble enough to learn the lesson, and brave enough to let the pain transform you. Your soul didn't bring you here to suffer meaninglessly. It brought you here to be transformed through suffering into a being capable of expressing Christ consciousness. Every challenge is curriculum. Every failure is feedback. Every pain is pointing you towards something your soul needs you to understand, develop, or transcend. Stop wasting your suffering. Start extracting the spiritual gold hidden in it. Your soul chose this pain because it contains exactly what you need for your evolution. The tragedy isn't that you're suffering. The tragedy is suffering without transformation. Don't let your soul's investment in your pain go bankrupt. Let it transform you. Let it wake you up. Let it destroy your false self so your true self can finally emerge. That's why you're here. That's why you chose this particular life with these particular challenges. Not because you deserved punishment, but because you deserved the fastest possible path home to God. And your soul knew that path runs directly through the fire of transformation that you're calling pain. Your blessings don't always look like blessings when they arrive. Sometimes they look like catastrophes, but from your soul's perspective, they're exactly what you ordered before you were born. Your body is keeping score of every thought you've ever dismissed as harmless. Edgar Cayce's trance readings revealed something that modern medicine is only now beginning to accept. The diseases manifesting in your physical body today began as disturbances in your mind months or even years ago, and you never noticed the moment you planted the seed of your own illness. While doctors treat your symptoms with prescriptions, Cayce saw the invisible architecture of disease construction, the precise moment when a resentful thought becomes inflammation, when suppressed anger transforms into digestive disorders, when fear calculates itself into your cells as chronic pain. This isn't metaphorical. In his psychic readings, Cayce described the exact physiological pathways through which your mental and emotional patterns literally restructure your organs, glands, and nervous system. Right now, as you read this, your current thought patterns are either building health or engineering your next diagnosis. And the terrifying truth is that you're completely unaware of which one you're doing. What illness are you creating in this very moment? Share your thoughts below. The human body doesn't lie, but the human mind is a masterful deceiver. Edgar Cayce, during thousands of medical readings conducted in deep trance states, repeatedly emphasized a principle that challenges everything we believe about disease. Your physical body is not the origin point of illness. It's merely the final destination. What you're experiencing as a diagnosis today began as an invisible disturbance in the mental and spiritual dimensions of your being, and by the time it manifested as physical symptoms, the disease had already been under construction for far longer than you realize. Cayce explained in his readings that the mind is the builder, not metaphorically, literally. Every thought you think, every emotion you suppress, every mental pattern you repeat is actively constructing or destroying the cellular reality of your physical body. He described the human being as existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously, the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. Disease, he revealed, always begins in the higher dimensions and works its way down. By the time your doctor diagnoses you, you're seeing the final stage of a process that started in your consciousness. Let's examine how this actually works. Cayce described the human body as containing multiple systems that modern medicine recognizes: circulatory, digestive, nervous, glandular. But he saw these systems as deeply interconnected with what he called the mental body and the spiritual body. Your thoughts aren't abstract events happening separately from your cells. They're active forces that directly influence cellular behavior, hormonal secretions, nerve impulses, and immune responses. When you harbor chronic resentment towards someone, Cayce's readings showed you're not just having a bad attitude, you're creating actual chemical changes in your liver and digestive organs. The resentment you think you're keeping private is being translated into bile dysfunction, creating the physical conditions for gallstones, digestive inflammation, and liver congestion. This is where most people completely misunderstand their own role in illness creation. You believe that your thoughts stay in your head, that emotions are temporary psychological states, that as long as you don't act on negative feelings, you're fine. Cayce's readings demolish this illusion. He saw that suppressed emotions don't disappear. They embed themselves into organ tissue. The anger you never expressed calculates itself into your stomach lining. The fear you continuously ignore instructs your adrenal glands to maintain chronic stress states. The grief you refuse to process settles into your lungs and respiratory system. Your body becomes a living archive of every unresolved mental and emotional pattern you carry. Cayce gave specific examples in his readings. He described cases where individuals developed chronic back pain, and when he examined the deeper causes, he found that these individuals were carrying mental burdens, worries about financial security, anxiety about family responsibilities, resentment about being unsupported by others. The mental pattern of carrying heavy burdens quite literally manifested as spinal problems, because the subconscious mind, which Cayce explained governs bodily functions, translated the mental burden into physical terms. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between a metaphorical burden and a physical one. If you mentally carry something heavy, your body responds by creating the physical sensation and structural problems associated with carrying weight. Consider what you're doing right now in your own life. What chronic thought patterns run through your mind daily? What emotions have you been suppressing for months, years, or decades? Cayce's readings warn that these aren't benign psychological habits. They're active construction projects building your future illnesses. The worry you dismiss as normal anxiety is instructing your nervous system to remain in perpetual fight or flight mode, depleting your adrenal glands, disrupting your sleep, weakening your immune function. The subtle resentment you feel toward a family member or co-worker isn't harmless. It's creating actual inflammation in your organs. The fear you carry about your future is programming your cells to operate in survival mode rather than thriving mode. Here's what makes this even more unsettling. Cayce explained that this process is largely unconscious. You're not deliberately creating disease. You're unaware that your thought patterns have physical consequences. Most people spend their entire lives in complete ignorance of the mind-body mechanism, blaming genetics, bad luck, or environmental factors for their illnesses, while never recognizing that they've been the primary architect of their own physical deterioration. The diagnosis you receive feels like something happening to you, when in reality it's something you've been building. But Cayce didn't just describe the problem, he revealed the mechanism with remarkable precision. He explained that thoughts and emotions create vibrations, and these vibrations directly affect the endocrine system, particularly the glands. Your pituitary gland, thyroid, adrenals, and reproductive glands don't just respond to hormonal signals, they respond to mental and spiritual states. When you maintain patterns of fear, these glands secrete different hormones than when you maintain patterns of faith. When you harbor resentment, your liver and gallbladder function differently than when you practice forgiveness. The quality of your consciousness determines the quality of your physiology. Cayce also emphasized the role of the nervous system as the bridge between mind and body. He described two aspects of the nervous system: the cerebrospinal system, which is under conscious control, and the sympathetic nervous system, which operates subconsciously. Most of your illness creation happens through the sympathetic system because it's connected directly to your subconscious beliefs and emotional patterns. You might consciously believe you're fine, but if your subconscious holds patterns of unworthiness, anxiety, or trauma, your sympathetic nervous system is executing those programs in your organs 24 hours a day. Your conscious positive thinking can't override subconscious disease programming. This raises an uncomfortable question. What subconscious beliefs are currently programming your cells? Cayce's readings suggest that many of our deepest disease-creating patterns aren't even from this lifetime. They're karmic patterns carried forward from previous incarnations. You might be manifesting illness based on unresolved guilt, fear, or spiritual lessons from lives you don't consciously remember. The mysterious chronic condition that doctors can't explain might be your soul's attempt to work through something that has nothing to do with this present life's experiences. Let's talk about specific diseases and their mental origins as Cayce described them. Digestive problems, which millions of people suffer from, almost always have their roots in worry, fear, and the inability to mentally and emotionally digest life experiences. Your stomach and intestines aren't just processing food, they're attempting to process your mental and emotional reality. When you can't accept or process difficult experiences, your digestive system mirrors this in physical dysfunction. Acid reflux, ulcers, irritable bowel syndrome. Cayce would examine these and consistently find that the person was mentally churning over problems, unable to find peace, constantly eating themselves up with worry. Cardiovascular problems, according to Cayce, often stem from emotional patterns related to love, joy, and circulation of life force. People who develop heart conditions frequently have histories of emotional repression, inability to give or receive love freely, or deep grief that was never released. The heart isn't just a pump, it's an emotional center, and when your emotional life is constricted, blocked, or damaged, your physical heart reflects this reality. Hypertension and high blood pressure manifest when you're under constant mental pressure, unable to release stress, living in perpetual tension between what you want and what you believe is possible. Joint problems and arthritis, Cayce revealed, often connect to mental rigidity and inflexibility. People who develop severe arthritis tend to have rigid thought patterns, difficulty adapting to change, and mental attitudes of criticism and judgment toward themselves and others. The body quite literally begins to stiffen and crystallize in response to the crystallized mental patterns. Your joints lock up because your mind has locked into fixed positions. The pain you feel when trying to move freely mirrors the mental pain of being trapped in rigid belief systems. Respiratory issues, asthma, chronic bronchitis, lung problems, frequently trace back to grief and the inability to fully embrace life. Cayce described the lungs as organs connected to the breath of life itself, both physically and spiritually. When you're carrying unprocessed grief, when you feel you can't breathe freely in your life circumstances, when you're spiritually suffocating under burdens, your respiratory system manifests these patterns as breathing difficulties. The child who develops asthma might be responding to an environment where emotional expression is suffocated. The adult with chronic respiratory problems might be someone who never allowed themselves to fully inhale life's possibilities. If you genuinely examine your life right now, what mental patterns are you maintaining that could be building your next illness? This isn't a comfortable question. It requires brutal honesty about the quality of your daily thoughts. Are you rehearsing conversations where you defend yourself? Are you replaying past hurts on a mental loop? Are you maintaining lists of people who wronged you? Are you living in constant low-grade fear about money, health, or the future? Every single one of these patterns is an instruction to your subconscious mind, which then translates it into cellular instructions. Cayce emphasized that healing cannot occur if you're simultaneously constructing disease. You can take all the medicine in the world, but if your thought patterns continue to create the conditions for illness, you'll either not heal or you'll develop a different disease. The body wants to heal. Cayce was adamant about this. But healing requires more than physical intervention. It requires mental and spiritual transformation. You must stop building the disease you're trying to cure. This is where personal responsibility becomes unavoidable. Modern medicine allows you to play the victim. Disease happens to you, doctors fix you, you're not responsible for your diagnosis. Cayce's readings shatter this comfortable illusion. You're not a passive victim of disease, you're an active participant, often the primary creator. The diagnosis you received, the chronic condition you suffer from, the mysterious symptoms doctors can't explain. These aren't random events or genetic bad luck. They're the physical manifestation of your mental and spiritual state. But here's what makes this truly challenging. Most people don't want this level of responsibility. It's far easier to blame external factors than to examine how your own consciousness is creating your physical reality. It's more comfortable to take a pill than to transform the resentment you've carried for 20 years. It's simpler to have surgery than to address the spiritual disconnection that's causing your body to break down. Cayce's teachings demand that you stop seeking external solutions for internally generated problems. The path forward, according to Cayce, requires something most people never do: sustained mental discipline combined with spiritual alignment. You cannot think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, maintain the same patterns, and expect different physical results. Healing requires that you become conscious of your unconscious disease-building processes and actively choose different mental patterns. This means daily monitoring of your thoughts, immediate interruption of destructive mental loops, conscious cultivation of constructive emotions, and regular spiritual practices that align your consciousness with higher frequencies. Cayce gave practical guidance in his readings. He emphasized prayer and meditation as essential tools for reprogramming the subconscious mind. Prayer, he explained, isn't about asking God to remove diseases you created. It's about aligning your consciousness with divine patterns of health. Meditation allows you to access and reprogram the subconscious patterns that are executing disease programs in your body. These aren't optional spiritual practices for people who like that sort of thing. According to Cayce, they're essential technologies for disease prevention and healing. He also stressed the importance of forgiveness as medicine. Unforgiveness, Cayce warned repeatedly, is one of the most potent disease-creating forces in human consciousness. The person you refuse to forgive isn't being harmed by your resentment. You are. Every day you maintain unforgiveness, you're dosing yourself with a poison that your organs must process. The grudge you justify as deserved is creating actual toxicity in your liver. The judgment you maintain as righteous is acidifying your entire system. Forgiveness isn't something you do for the other person. It's a powerful act of self-healing. Additionally, Cayce emphasized that constructive thinking must become a deliberate practice. You can't just avoid negative thoughts. You must actively cultivate positive, constructive, spiritually aligned thoughts. This requires that you consciously choose what you focus on, what you rehearse mentally, what stories you tell yourself about your life. Your mind will think something. The question is whether you're directing it toward health-building patterns or allowing it to default to disease-building patterns. Physical practices matter too, but not in the way most people think. Cayce recommended proper diet, exercise and bodywork, not as standalone solutions, but as support for mental and spiritual transformation. You can't eat your way out of a resentment-based illness. You can't exercise away a disease rooted in spiritual disconnection. Physical practices help, but only when combined with the mental and spiritual work of addressing root causes. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most people never accept. If you're chronically ill, there's a consciousness problem you haven't addressed. If you keep developing new health problems despite medical treatment, there's a mental pattern you're maintaining that's stronger than the medicine. If you've been diagnosed with a serious disease, there's likely a serious spiritual misalignment or unresolved emotional trauma that created the conditions for that disease to manifest. Your body is not betraying you. It's revealing you. So what now? Cayce's readings demand that you ask yourself questions most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What am I not facing about myself? What emotions have I been suppressing? What spiritual truths am I resisting? What unforgiveness am I maintaining? What fears are controlling my thoughts? What beliefs about myself are destructive? Where am I out of alignment with my soul's purpose? These aren't psychological questions for self-improvement. They're diagnostic questions that can reveal the invisible roots of your physical conditions. The most challenging aspect of Cayce's teaching on mind-created illness is that it removes all your excuses. You can't blame your parents, your circumstances, your genetics, or bad luck. You must look directly at the quality of your own consciousness and recognize that you've been given tremendous creative power and you've been using it unconsciously to harm yourself. Every disease you have is a message. The question is whether you're willing to decode the message and do the work of transformation, or whether you'll continue to treat symptoms while ignoring the mental and spiritual roots. Your mind is building something right now, either health or disease. There is no neutral. Every thought is either constructive or destructive to your cellular reality. The question isn't whether you have the power to create illness. Cayce's readings prove you do. The question is whether you'll finally take responsibility for that power and begin using it consciously to build health instead. What will you choose to build today? If this resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to continue exploring Edgar Cayce's transformative spiritual teachings, and drop a comment, sharing what mental pattern you're committed to changing after watching this. Let's support each other in this journey toward conscious healing. The moment your heart stops beating, you don't cease to exist, you finally wake up. Everything you've been taught about death being the end is the greatest lie ever told to humanity, and Edgar Cayce spent decades proving it through thousands of documented psychic readings that revealed what actually happens when your physical body fails. While religions argue about heaven and hell, and science insists consciousness is just brain chemistry, Cayce, in deep trance states, accessed a realm where he could see the truth. Death is nothing more than walking from one room into another, and you've done it countless times before. The reason this terrifies most people isn't because death is real, it's because we've invested everything into a temporary identity that was never meant to last. What if the life you're living right now is just a brief assignment, a single chapter in an eternal story, and you're so hypnotized by the illusion of mortality that you're missing the entire point of why you're here? The people who fear death the most are often those who haven't truly lived, because deep down the soul knows when it's wasting precious time in physical form. Here's what Cayce revealed that changes everything. You are not your body, you never were, and the moment you understand this, you'll stop living in fear and start living with purpose. What does Cayce's revelation about death mean for how you're living today? Share your perspective in the comments. Edgar Cayce didn't guess about what happens after death. He went there. During his psychic readings, while in a self-induced trance state, Cayce's consciousness would leave his physical body and access what he called the Akashic records, the cosmic library containing every soul's journey through eternity. And what he discovered was so revolutionary, so contrary to everything we've been conditioned to believe, that it should fundamentally alter how every person on this planet approaches their daily life. Death, according to Cayce's readings, is not an ending, it's a graduation. It's the soul finally being released from the dense, limiting container of flesh and returning to its natural state of pure consciousness and light. Think about that for a moment. Right now, as you watch this, you are an eternal spiritual being temporarily compressed into a physical form, walking around pretending that this body, which ages, deteriorates, and eventually fails, is who you actually are. It's like an actor becoming so absorbed in a role that they forget they're performing in a play. Cayce revealed that we are spiritual beings, having a human experience, not human beings hoping for a spiritual future. The difference between those two perspectives is everything. In his readings, Cayce explained that when the physical body dies, the soul doesn't go somewhere else. It simply shifts frequency. Imagine turning a radio dial from one station to another. The first station doesn't cease to exist when you change channels. You've just tuned into a different frequency. That's exactly what death is. A frequency shift from the dense material plane to higher dimensions of consciousness that have always been there, always existed, running parallel to physical reality. The realms Cayce described aren't distant locations in space. They're different states of being, different levels of awareness that interpenetrate our physical world but remain invisible to those trapped in material consciousness. This is where it gets uncomfortable for most people, because if death is just a transition, if you truly never die, then what exactly have you been doing with your life? Cayce's readings make it devastatingly clear that every single day you spend in physical form is an irreplaceable opportunity for soul growth, for learning lessons that can only be learned in the crucible of material existence. You chose to be here. Before you incarnated into this body, your soul, working with higher guidance, selected this life, this time period, these specific challenges and relationships, because they offered precisely the experiences needed for your spiritual evolution. But here's the brutal truth that Cayce's work forces us to confront. Most people sleepwalk through their entire lives, completely unaware that they're on a divine assignment. They chase comfort, accumulate possessions, seek pleasure, avoid pain, and reach the end of their physical existence, having never asked the one question that matters. Why am I here? What is my soul trying to accomplish through this incarnation? And when they cross over, when they shed the physical body and see their life from the perspective of the eternal soul, the regret is profound. Not regret over what they did, but regret over what they failed to become. The potential they left unrealized, the growth they avoided, because it was difficult. Cayce revealed that immediately after death, there is a life review. Not a judgment imposed by an external God, but a self-evaluation where the soul experiences every moment of the life just lived from every perspective, including feeling the impact of their actions on others. You become the person you hurt. You experience the love you gave. You feel the opportunities you squandered. And in that moment of complete soul-level honesty, there is nowhere to hide from the truth of how you actually lived. Did you love? Did you serve? Did you grow? Did you fulfill the mission your soul came here to accomplish? Or did you waste decades obsessing over trivial matters, chasing illusions, and running from the discomfort that signals growth? The grand illusion isn't death. The grand illusion is believing that this temporary physical existence is all there is, and therefore living as if comfort and survival are the highest goals. Cayce's readings shatter that illusion. When you understand that you are eternal, that you've lived multiple lives before this one, and will live more after it, that your soul is on an infinite journey toward union with the divine, suddenly the stakes change. Suddenly that argument you had yesterday seems petty. Suddenly that career you've been building to impress others feels hollow. Suddenly the question becomes, am I using this precious temporary physical life to evolve my soul, or am I wasting it? Cayce taught that after the life review, the soul doesn't immediately reincarnate. There are intermediate dimensions, what he called planetary sojourns, where consciousness continues to learn and develop between physical lives. These aren't physical planets, they're states of consciousness associated with specific qualities. A soul might spend time in what Cayce called the Venus dimension, learning about love and beauty, or the Mars dimension, dealing with lessons around power and conflict. This isn't punishment or reward, it's continued education. The universe is a cosmic school, and graduation never comes, because there's always deeper wisdom to attain, always more refined frequencies of love and consciousness to embody. And here's what makes Cayce's revelation so urgent for your life right now. You don't get infinite opportunities to complete the specific mission you chose for this incarnation. Yes, your soul is eternal. Yes, you'll have other lives. But this particular configuration of circumstances, this unique set of relationships and challenges, this specific window of time, this is your one chance to accomplish what you came here to do in this form. You can't rewind. You can't get a do-over for 2025. When this life ends, the opportunities specific to this incarnation end with it. So let me ask you directly, are you living like someone who understands they're eternal? Or are you living in fear, clinging to security, avoiding risk, playing it safe because some part of you still believes the lie that death is the end? Because if you truly grasped what Cayce revealed, that you cannot die, that you are an immortal spiritual being, that this life is just one scene in an eternal drama, you would live with such courage, such purpose, such fearless commitment to your soul's mission that your entire existence would transform. Cayce also revealed something that disturbs many people. Not everyone progresses at the same rate. Some souls use physical life brilliantly, extracting every lesson, growing exponentially, and graduating to higher levels of consciousness. Other souls waste incarnation after incarnation, cycling through the same patterns, making the same mistakes, refusing to learn, refusing to grow. Death doesn't automatically make you wise. Crossing over doesn't erase the consciousness you've developed, or failed to develop. You take your level of spiritual maturity with you. A selfish, unconscious person doesn't become enlightened just because their body stops working. They carry that selfishness into the next dimension and eventually back into another physical life until they finally choose to wake up. This is why spiritual laziness is so dangerous. This is why living on autopilot, just going through the motions, distracting yourself with entertainment and consumption while avoiding the inner work of consciousness development, this is why it matters so much. Every day you postpone your awakening is a day your soul could have been growing. And your soul knows. Even if your conscious mind is fooled by the grand illusion, even if you successfully distract yourself for decades, your soul knows when you're wasting time. That nagging feeling that there's something more, that you're meant for something greater, that you're not living up to your potential. That's your eternal self, trying to wake you up before this incarnation runs out. Now, before we go deeper, if this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see your life from a different perspective, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. This content isn't entertainment, it's a wake-up call. And the algorithm needs to know that people are ready for truth that challenges everything. Your engagement helps this message reach others who desperately need to hear it. Cayce's readings revealed that one of the primary reasons souls choose to incarnate in physical form is because Earth offers something unique. The experience of being cut off from spiritual awareness, of operating with limited consciousness in a dense material environment. It's like a master musician choosing to play with one hand tied behind their back to develop new skills. Physical life is intentionally difficult, intentionally limiting, because struggle and resistance are what force consciousness to grow. You didn't come here for comfort, you came here for transformation. And here's the key insight that separates those who understand Cayce's message from those who miss it entirely. Knowing that you're eternal doesn't mean you can waste this life. In fact, it means the opposite. It means this life matters more than you ever imagined, because it's one precious opportunity to accelerate your soul's evolution in ways that aren't possible in the higher dimensions where existence is easy and awareness is clear. Physical life is spiritual boot camp. It's supposed to be challenging. The challenges aren't mistakes, they're the curriculum. But what are most people doing with this incredible opportunity? They're medicating themselves into numbness. They're pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain as if those are life's purpose. They're building elaborate ego structures designed to make them feel important while their souls starve for meaning. They're so terrified of death that they never truly live, spending their entire existence in low-grade anxiety about losing what was never real to begin with. Cayce revealed that the people who fear death the most are those who haven't connected with their eternal nature during physical life. And the way you connect with your eternal nature isn't through belief, it's through experience. Meditation, deep prayer, moments of selfless service, times when you're so absorbed in creative work or genuine love that the ego disappears and you touch something vast and timeless within yourself. These are the moments when you remember what you truly are. These are the moments when the grand illusion cracks and you catch a glimpse of reality. The irony is that most people spend their lives accumulating things they'll have to leave behind, building identities they'll have to release, and investing in temporary structures that provide zero value to the eternal soul. Your bank account doesn't transfer to the next dimension. Your job title means nothing after death. Your physical appearance, which so many people obsess over, returns to dust. The only thing you take with you is consciousness, the wisdom you've gained, the love you've cultivated, the spiritual maturity you've developed. That's it. That's the only currency that matters in the eternal economy. And this is where Cayce's revelation becomes a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's incredibly liberating to know you cannot die, that you are eternal, that this life is just one chapter in an infinite story. On the other hand, it's terrifying to realize that you've been given this opportunity and you might be wasting it. Because when you cross over, when the body dies and you see clearly for the first time in decades, you're going to ask yourself, did I do what I came here to do? Did I love deeply? Did I serve authentically? Did I face my fears and grow beyond them? Or did I play it safe, avoid discomfort and leave my divine assignment incomplete? Cayce taught that every soul has a unique purpose, a specific contribution only they can make, and discovering that purpose is the most important work of any incarnation. Not everyone's purpose is grand in worldly terms. Your mission might be to master patience through decades of difficult relationships. It might be to embody compassion in a harsh environment. It might be to learn forgiveness after betrayal. The soul doesn't measure success by external achievements. It measures growth in consciousness, expansion of love, refinement of spiritual qualities. But here's what breaks my heart as I study Cayce's work. How many people reach the end of physical life, never having asked what their soul came here to learn? They spent 80 years on earth and never once went inward to ask, what is my divine assignment? What is this life trying to teach me? How can I serve the highest good? They were so hypnotized by the material world, so convinced by the grand illusion that this temporary existence was all there is, that they never accessed the spiritual dimension of their own being. You are not your job. You are not your relationships. You are not your achievements or failures. You are not your body, your personality, your history, your trauma, or your triumphs. Those are all temporary costumes, temporary roles in the eternal drama. The real you, the consciousness reading these words right now, is immortal, has always existed, and will always exist. The question is, what are you doing with this particular scene in the play? Are you giving the performance of a lifetime, fully committed to extracting every lesson and expressing every gift? Or are you phoning it in, going through the motions, waiting for life to be over so you can finally rest? Because here's the secret Cayce's readings reveal. There is no rest. There is only evolution. Consciousness never stops growing, learning, expanding. Death doesn't give you a break. It gives you a new classroom. And if you didn't master the lessons of this life, if you avoided the challenges and ran from the growth opportunities, you'll find yourself in another physical body someday, facing the same lessons in a different form until you finally choose to wake up and do the work. This isn't meant to be depressing, it's meant to be energizing. You are eternal. Death is an illusion. The worst thing that can happen in this life already isn't real. So what are you afraid of? What's holding you back from living with total commitment to your soul's mission? What are you protecting? What are you clinging to? What false security are you choosing over authentic spiritual growth? Cayce revealed that the moment of death is actually beautiful for those who've lived consciously. Instead of fear and resistance, there's recognition and relief. The soul that has done its work, that has loved deeply and served faithfully, that has faced its shadows and grown beyond ego, that soul doesn't experience death as loss. It experiences death as liberation, as finally being released from the limitations of physical form and returning to the fullness of spiritual awareness. It's like taking off a heavy costume after a long performance. There's no tragedy in it. There's only completion. But the soul that has avoided its mission, that has spent a lifetime in distraction and self-deception, that crosses over having failed to accomplish what it came here to do, that soul experiences profound regret. Not punishment from God, but the natural consequence of wasted opportunity. And that regret becomes the motivation for the next incarnation, the driving force that says, I will not waste the next chance. I will not sleepwalk through another life. So here's what I want you to understand, deeply and personally. Edgar Cayce's revelation that you will never die isn't meant to make you complacent. It's meant to set you free from the fear that keeps you small, that keeps you playing it safe, that keeps you from stepping into the fullness of your divine purpose. You are eternal. This means you have nothing to lose and everything to give. This means the only real failure is living inauthentically, betraying your soul's mission for the approval of people who are just as lost as you are. The grand illusion is the belief that you are this body, this personality, this collection of achievements and possessions. The grand illusion is thinking that when your heart stops, you stop. The grand illusion is living as if this one short physical life is all you get, and therefore safety and comfort should be your top priorities. Cayce shattered that illusion. He showed us that we are spiritual beings on an eternal journey, and this life, this precious, temporary, challenging physical incarnation, is your opportunity to grow in ways that aren't possible in any other dimension. What are you going to do with that knowledge? Are you going to keep living the way you've been living, trapped in fear and distraction? Or are you going to wake up, recognize your eternal nature, and start living like someone on a divine mission? Because that's what you are, that's what every person is, whether they know it or not. The only difference is that some people remember and live accordingly, while others remain hypnotized by the illusion until their body dies and they're forced to remember. Which one will you be? When this life ends, when your soul reviews the journey and sees clearly how you spent your time, your energy, your consciousness, will you be satisfied? Will you know that you gave everything, that you loved fully, that you served faithfully, that you grew courageously? Or will you see decades of wasted potential, of comfort chosen over growth, of the ego's agenda prioritized over the soul's mission? The end is a grand illusion. But how you live between now and that false ending, that's the only thing that's ultimately real. That's what you take with you. That's what determines where consciousness goes next, what lessons you still need to learn, how much you've evolved toward union with the divine. Cayce spent his life revealing these truths so that people would stop wasting their incarnations. Don't let his revelation be just interesting information. Let it be the wake-up call that transforms how you live every single day. You will never die. Your consciousness is eternal. This life is one scene in an infinite drama. Now the question is, what kind of scene are you going to make it? Will it be forgettable, mediocre, just going through the motions? Or will it be powerful, transformative, fully committed to the growth and service your soul came here to express? The choice is yours. The time is now. And your eternal self is watching, waiting to see if you'll finally remember who you truly are and start living accordingly. If this video has shifted something in you, if you're seeing your life differently now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Share your commitment. Share what you're going to change. Share how Cayce's revelation is going to impact how you live from this moment forward. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because this is just the beginning. We're going deep into Cayce's most transformative teachings, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. You are eternal. You will never die. The illusion has been revealed. Now go live like it.